Okay, this is LaTeX Character Basics Part 3, and hopefully you already went over Parts 1 and 2. In this one we're going to look at some of the issues involving spaces, which could be space characters, tabs, or even one new line. And we're going to look at the difference between spaces between words and spaces between sentences. We'll look at how the tilde character is used. We'll look at sentences that end with a capital letter, and we'll also touch on French spacing. And that's the document there. Now let's look at the code guide. Experiment. The best way to learn is with the keyboard and start typing stuff in. And own it. That means apply your own content, your own ideas. It'll sink in faster. File extension, always use the .tex file extension. And as we go through the document we're producing here, watch the lines with the green comments. Those are the ones to pay attention to. Make sure you get them right. And the line numbers, don't type in the line numbers in blue that you see to the left of the code blocks. If you do type those in, your code's not going to compile. So those are for reference only. Code demos. All the code blocks are followed by resized images of PDF documents produced from the code blocks. So there should be no coding errors or typos, because the code you see is actually producing the PDFs. And let's look at the code for the finished document here. You can see there's a lot here, but a lot of it's repeated, and there's nothing too complex there. But again, let's look at the finished document here. Okay, we're going to start simple. So this is where we're starting. You see line 1, we've got the document class is an article, and we're using letter paper size, 12-point type, and the document begins on line 2, it ends on line 4, and the only content so far is on line 3. We've got the LaTeX logo followed by Character Basics Part 3. And that's where we're at so far. And we're going to put that in a section header, which we're doing on line 3. That's our section header. And now you can see it's part of a header. And we're going to put some text under that. Nothing complicated, keeping it simple here. Okay, and we're going to add a subsection here, and we're looking at the difference between spaces between words and spaces between sentences. So oftentimes you'll see the on that first line of the second paragraph, you'll see the funny looking symbol within the first set of parentheses. That's just used to represent a space. So if you've got a space which follows any one of a period, a question mark, or an exclamation mark, if they follow a lowercase letter, LaTeX will interpret that to be the end of a sentence. Okay, and it gives more spacing between sentences than it does words, so it kind of matters. And that's not always a good thing, as we're going to see here. So you see on 1, near the middle of the page, on 1 you've got Mr. Smith, and you just have a space between Mr. and Smith. You see, Mr. is followed by a period, so LaTeX is interpreting that as the end of a sentence. So if you look to the right, it's producing Mr. Smith with a little bit too much space. So you want to reduce that, and you can see it's reduced both in lines 2 and 3. On 2, you use the tilde, and the space is reduced. You can also use a backslash followed by a space, and the space is also reduced. Okay, and I'm going to continue on looking at the tilde character, at the bottom of the page. And if you put Mr. Smith in the middle of a paragraph, you wouldn't want LaTeX to break the paragraph between Mr. and Smith. So if you put the tilde in there, it'll prevent LaTeX from breaking the lines at that point. So that's another benefit to using the tilde as opposed to the backslash followed by a space. Okay, and we got a subsection here, sentences that end in a capital letter. Okay, so we're going to look at this in a second here. And yeah, so let's just look at the PDF here. Okay, so on 1 you see sentence 1, and 1 is actually ended with a capital E. So LaTeX does not interpret that as the end of a sentence because the period before the space actually follows a capital letter, so it doesn't see that as the end of the sentence. So you could see to the right of there, the space is too small. But we want LaTeX to see that as sentence 1 being a complete sentence and sentence 2 being a separate sentence. So what we do here, before the period, you can see on line 2, and after the E, after the capital E, we got a backslash and then an @ symbol, and that'll force LaTeX to look at the space following the period as a sentence separating space. And it works the same way with question marks or exclamation points. Okay, and next we're going to take a look at French spacing. And French spacing is basically eliminating the difference between spacing between words and sentences. So it basically takes what it would normally look at is sentence spacing and just use word spacing instead. And we're going to see why you might want to use that in a second here. So here with this list, we've got a Mr. and Mrs. Griffith, Mr. and Mrs. Flintstone, and you got all these spaces following the periods, and before the periods you've got lowercase letters. So LaTeX is interpreting all these things as ends of sentences, which is why you've got too much space in there. Okay, and we want to reduce the amount of space. So we're going to go down here, and you can see we're starting French spacing on line 98, or that's just the verbatim thing, but we actually started on 124 and ended on 142 with the non-French spacing. So let's look at that. So this is the original. This is too much spacing. That's not what we want. And here's the code that we enter. So you can see we start French spacing towards the top of the code block, and then at the very bottom you've got the non-French spacing command. Okay, and that's what that produces. So you can see the spaces are a little bit tighter. They're kind of what you want them to be. Okay, and if you want to type the code, this is the place to do it. Just hit pause and get it from here. Okay, and let's look at the final document one more time. Okay, and that is it for this tutorial.